Okay, let me enlarge this. Okay, hi everyone. This is Sean Pindley for history, organizational history and development. This is the first one of these I've tried to make with this software, so I'm feeling a little strange right now. I'm having to look between my two different screens. But this is just a quick rundown of week one and what's expected of week one. And I'll go ahead and mention a change I'm going to make to the due dates for something, but we'll get to that in just a second. This is going to give you an overview of this week and then show you how I'd recommend you go through the materials to be done in time. But anyway, just as a rundown, what we're going to do this week is kind of simple. I've given you a template for a timeline for education reform. You'll see if you look at that template that each of the kind of key moments that I've listed in there are already listed for you. You'll just have to go and find information and fill out those boxes with whatever information you found useful about each of those. So, for this week, as in most weeks, we follow a pattern. Each week, there's going to be a report, a presentation, and a reflection. The additional thing this week is that you're going to fill out that timeline template. So that's the additional thing we'll do starting out this week. That'll be a little different than the remainder of the semester or course. So you'll have the education reform timeline template to fill out. Then you'll write a report over that timeline. And then you'll give a presentation of the report through Screencast-O-Matic. And I have a link up on the presentation sheet for how to actually get your Screencast-O-Matic presentation onto get a link onto that sheet to share with your classmates, and then you'll write a reflection over the class presentations. So the report over the timeline is the one I think most people have questions about. Since I'm assuming most people in this program don't have a background in history, but maybe you do, but most people probably don't. What you're really doing with the timeline is, you're practicing using an historical tool, a tool of historical research, but you're also going to, I think in the assignment, I say something to the effect of, I want you to come to a tentative historical judgment about the timeline in your report. So what that means is you're going to look at all of the information you found, and you're going to see what kind of categories you can group things in, and then see what kind of judgment you can make about those categories. So for example, let's say we did a timeline over Willy Wonka's Chocolate Factory. Okay, so you might notice that some of the events on the timeline that you've put together have to do with workers' issues. Some of the events have to do with the change to the physical changes to the factory over time, and some of the issues have to do with changes in management style and philosophy. So you put those in a management category. And still others would have to, you'd notice another category that had to do with product changes over time. So you got these four categories, workers' issues, physical changes of the factory, changes in management, and changes in product. But maybe once you've got these categories laid out, you notice that there's kind of a continuing problem that you see spread out among the categories. Like maybe you realize that this whole issue of workers actually drives many of these changes. Like what to do about the workers, how to keep them in check, how to prevent unionization, all filters into things you've discovered about management and maybe the physical changes to the factory. So you realize that one category kind of bleeds over into the others, or it just seems to dominate the timeline to you. Well, then you can make a tentative historical judgment. You can say something like, the history of Willy Wonka's Chocolate Factory is really the history of Oompa Loompa oppression, or something like that, worker oppression. And then you're going to you can lay out your reason why you think that's the case. So that's what I mean by a tentative historical judgment. Kind of look at the materials you've gathered in your timeline and ask yourself, do I see patterns here that make one thing stand out more than the other, more than the rest of the things I'm seeing? And then make a tentative judgment about that. Why is it that thing stands out more than the others? Now, each person might see a different thing. There's not a right and wrong answer, especially when we're talking about something as complex as the history of education reform. So there won't be one right answer to this. You're going to see something that your classmates aren't going to see. A couple of you might see similar things. But your answers to that, your tentative historical judgments, I suspect, will be pretty different from each other, given the scale of the thing we're looking at, education reform. So that's the assignments in a nutshell, and that's my advice on how to do the report on the timeline. So objectives. Our objectives for doing this, we begin with a study of education reform in this course in order to provide you with a model for organizational change across time, right? Because that's what we're looking at, increasing your expertise just about organizational change across time. To build your expertise regarding at least one crucial institution in American culture, and by that I mean public education or education. One of the first things we did as a country is we built Harvard University. I'm virtually certain in 1636. I'm pretty sure that was the year. So we are a country that began with institutions of education. And then the third objective is to practice constructing a timeline as a tool of historical analysis. I can tell you, even if you don't do you're not doing a PhD in history here, but a timeline, it comes in handy in almost any research project. You can't really easily think of one where you wouldn't actually put a timeline to good use. Everyone I knew who did a doctorate, including myself, did a timeline. I did one, of course, because mine was in history, but everyone else I knew in other fields had some form of timeline that they used as a tool. Because without it, your research will lack the historical context that will make it make good sense to your readers. Right? So that's what we're aiming for here. So things to know. Yeah, the timeline template, it's provided for you in the week 1 introduction. If you ever want to see everything for the week, just go to the introduction and you'll see the link to everything else in the week. So the timeline template's right there in the week 1 introduction. You'll just have to fill it in. And your report must, and you, by the way, you don't hand in the timeline template to me. You just use that to create your report and your presentation. You can use you can use it visually in your presentations, but it's not something you explicitly hand in. And then your report has to connect an ongoing issue in education to the history of educational reform. Okay, so what's something we're still dealing with, and how can we connect that to its antecedents, right? So you might use the Chronicle of Higher Education website, which is a good place to go if you're looking for something current to connect your observation to. Or you might Google education policy and the word news and see what you come up with. Okay. So here's my suggested procedure, and this is the bit that's going to change. Sorry, really loud airplane over me right now. I hope you can't hear that. Here's my suggested procedure for how to get through the week in time. And this is going to change a bit because everything that I've given you as a Saturday by noon deadline, I'm actually pushing back to a Sunday by noon deadline. That was after getting some communications. Both Dr. Houston and I got communications from students about, given COVID, the difficulty of getting things done during the week and needing the weekend. So just be aware that those Saturday by noon deadlines are all going to be pushed to Sunday by noon. I'll start working on that today. Hopefully I'll get finished with it today, but if you happen to come across something after today and it mentions a Saturday noon deadline, just know that those are all being moved to Sunday at noon. Okay, but here's my suggested procedure based on the Saturday by noon deadline. Okay, so just tweak this a little in your mind for Sunday by noon. Okay, so Wednesday, I would go through the week 1 introduction and read all the articles and example chapters. I say examples, but example chapters or example templates. So I do all the reading on Wednesday. And then if you have time, I'd do a discussion forum post also tonight. But if not, I would do that Thursday. And then also Thursday evening, I'd start working on, I would complete the timeline and start working on that 2 to 3 page report and have it finished by Friday. And then Saturday, Friday night into Saturday, I'd work on the screencast presentation of the timeline and your report and upload all of it. That again is going to get moved to Sunday. If you feel like you need an extra day, that's perfectly fine. I'm going to move those due dates to Sunday. I created this timeline on the assumption that we were doing the Saturday deadline, but like I said, just today, Dr. Houston and I conferred and decided that the Sunday by noon deadline would be a little better for everyone. And then before Tuesday at midnight, just view presentations, write your reflection, which is about 2 to 3 pages. I forget how long off the top of my head, but I believe it's 2 to 3 pages reflection, and then respond to the discussions. You don't just do your discussion post, you'll have to actually respond as well to a couple of posts. So that's the suggested timeline. You can use this as a kind of a sounding board for whether or not you're making it through the work in a nice clip, just in your mind, switch that Saturday to a Sunday. Okay. So here's the rubric for the week, and I put sort of to the side because on the doctoral level, we don't typically use rubrics because the work here, on the one hand, it's more complex than undergraduate work, but on the other hand, it's also tailored to your research. And so to make a rubric that was fair to everyone, that kind of encompassed everyone's interests and still pulled everything together in a standard way, would require that I wrote like a page of narrative for each element of the rubric. And I'm not going to do that. That'd be like a 20-page rubric for one assignment. Um, so that being said, here's what you should aim for always in your work. Use the timeline to clearly and precisely connect some contemporary issue in education to its historic antecedents. Okay. You should analyze and synthesize the readings, never merely summarize. I know everyone knows that by now, but it bears repeating. Never merely summarize. We're always looking to analyze and synthesize, take things apart and put them back together in creative and critical ways. The third thing is to engage thoughtfully, not facilely, with classmates' contributions and discussion forums. It is always, I know we're always pressed for time. There's no such thing as doing a doctorate without being pressed for time, but it really stands out like a sore thumb when someone doesn't take the time to actually engage thoughtfully in a discussion forum. And then demonstrate both creative and critical understanding of educational reform, its causes and consequences. And then exhibit concern for prose style, including doctoral level diction. So just make sure that you're working each step of the way through your doctoral program, that you're working on developing a finer and finer prose style. Because remember, the quality of our writing mirrors the quality of our thought. The two are inextricable. And so you want to make sure that the quality of your thought is being reflected in what you're putting on the page. Okay, so that's what I have for the week. I'm sorry this is weird. I'm in strange lighting. This is my first time trying this, but I will see you tonight between 6 and 7 on Google Meet. And I will be there to answer any questions you have. And between now and then, I'll be changing as many of those Saturday noon due dates to Sunday noon. So see you later.